I don't look too much at past experience at all. I think more about, and I test for how inquisitive they are and how fast I think they can be coached and learn and grow. And I think like how comfortable being uncomfortable are they? Mindset to me, I think is so much more important than where you worked, who you sold to, what were your average deal sizes. Like you'll learn those things. I think I see amazing salespeople join high growth stage companies and fail because it's too much for them. They're too used to having a lot of resource and process and playbook and like something to follow and navigate, and they'll do it very well and be very disciplined about it. Right. But they're insanely uncomfortable being in a company where it's like, we don't know.
We don't have a map. We need to write the map.
Yeah, you need to help us write it.
Yeah.
So I actually think like mindset is more important to me than anything, and like a self-awareness for what we're doing now and what we could be doing in the future.
I'm Devin Reed.
And I'm Sheena Badani.
And you're watching Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence podcast powered by Gong.
Keep watching here to see the full interview. Or if you like to listen to podcasts on the go, check out the links in the description below.
And if you like what you hear, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or all of them. Why not? And while you're there, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We personally read every single one, and I think I speak for both of us when I say they mean the world to us.
Could not agree more, Devin. Now, without further ado, here's the episode you've been waiting for.
David, thanks so much for joining us, man. I know you didn't have to travel very far, but we appreciate your time all the same.
It was a long couple blocks walk.
Yeah.
It can sometimes feel long in San Francisco walking those 2 blocks in Soma.
There can be an eventful 2 blocks downtown. We like to start every episode by understanding how these successful revenue leaders start their day. So do you have a go-to morning routine you can share?
My routine has changed a lot. And I'll say why. So I have a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old at home.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife just went back to work from maternity leave last week. And our morning routine has changed dramatically from where it was previously. I am an early morning riser, and I also have to be. So the company I work for, Tessian, the San Francisco office is actually a new location for us. Our headquarters is London. So the 8-hour time difference means I'm on the phone at like 6 a.m., 6:30 most mornings, sometimes earlier, although I try to avoid it.
I don't envy you.
So yeah, it's work mode pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And actually I love that. I love just kind of jumping into it. Now that we have kids, it's finding the balance.
Yeah.
Of how do we kind of get them dressed and ready to go to school and daycare for the day, and then get out the door and kind of get in the city on time. So it's a transition right now. I would say when I can, and I'm not on calls, I love to listen to podcasts. So I actually drive into the city, 1, so I can take calls if I need to, but 2, so I can listen to podcasts.
Nice.
And I try not to listen to sales podcasts, which is comical considering where we are right now.
Sure.
But I try to just to listen to things I just find like interesting and motivating.
Yeah.
So a big one that I love listening to is How I Built This.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Guy Raz.
Love Guy. I just find it really inspiring to listen to those folks.
Yeah. I don't take offense to that, having a sales podcast myself. There are times where it's like, when you do something for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, sometimes listening to that thing isn't really what's going to move the needle for you. So I love that podcast. It is it's inspiring, and it also is kind of just gives you another way to view how other people view their challenges, right? When they're building their company. And it's like everyone kind of has some sort of obstacle in their path. And it's just great to hear, how very determined people made it happen.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Seems like you have a little entrepreneurial bug in you too then.
Increasingly. I think it's different for everyone. The first time I wanted to test that theory was like when I left what was like the safety net and amazing experience I actually had at LinkedIn and went to Dropbox. And then when people think Dropbox, most people know it. A lot of us have used it in one form or another over the years. But when I joined it was like a 300-person company, no sales team, all revenue was consumer. Like we weren't doing anything really B2B. We were just trying to figure out how to do that.
Right.
And that was my plunge of, I want to see if I like this environment and if I like building. I have no idea if I can do it, but we'll find out. Yeah. So I have learned since then, subsequently, yes, I do like that.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. So today you're VP of Global Sales at Tessian. Can you tell us a little bit more about what does your role entail? What does your team look like?
Yeah, so I'm responsible for revenue at Tessian. Which means starting with like reporting to our board on just like how we're tracking and our forecasts and making sure we're tracking to our plans. But all things revenue, I'm ultimately responsible for. So we currently have teams in London and here in San Francisco, and we've been on a growth tear similar to you guys. And I'm responsible for all the teams that help make revenue a reality and then help us retain our revenue. So thinking about our lead generation teams, our sales development reps, our account executives, and then post-sale thinking of our customer success managers and the teams that make sure our customers get the most from our product.
Nice. Terrific. And how large is your guys' sales team?
So I actually I'm preparing for an all hands I have tomorrow to kick off the new year. And it's funny, like sometimes you really need to step away and just do the math and you lose sight where you get so caught up in your day to day of just how far you come in such a short amount of time. So here's a crazy stat. So our org right now is about 65. 50% of those people have joined in October 1st or later.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man. A lot of new folks.
Yes, a lot of new folks. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be with the company. But yeah, we've grown very quickly.
That's awesome. I imagine you're onboarding. Hopefully, you have a sales enablement manager or someone helping with that. But that's a good way to stress test your onboarding program.
Very much so, yes. And we do have a head of sales enablement. He's literally onboarding right now in London, like literally right now. So yes, well, and we will use Gong as part of our onboarding and enablement as well.
Nice.
Terrific. So Tessian is the world's first human layer security platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means and what is your product protecting against?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. So if you backed up like 20 years ago, chief information security officers, that was not a thing. But like, as everyone knows who would be listening to this podcast, like with the explosion of content creation and content being shared digitally, that's an amazing tool to like move quickly, and it helps companies kind of really accelerate, collaborate, and just do meaningful work faster. But it presents lots of opportunities for mistakes to happen or for people to gain maliciously access to your content that can be really sensitive. And so like as this like explosion has happened, how do we secure this data now has become increasingly more and more important. And what's nuts is like the rate of investment. I mean, there's so many amazing security companies out there that secure, infrastructure or endpoints. There's great hardware and software companies. And yet we're spending all this time and focus and energy and resource here, but the rate of data breaches is outpacing the investment we make in the space.
Wow. That's very alarming.
Yeah, it's and it's going to continue. And so what we've realized is we feel fundamentally we're historically have solved for the wrong problem. And it's the fact that no matter how good your security programs are and your protocols are, you're relying on humans to do the right thing 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And we're not. We make mistakes.
Yeah, of course.
That's why we're human.
Yeah.
And until that time in the future where we no longer are creating and sharing this content and it's just done by drones and bots, you have to find ways to empower your users to make less mistakes.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're really solving for. So we've actually brought machine learning algorithms to humans to superpower them and help them prevent making silly mistakes, like sending the wrong email to the wrong customer or vendor, sending the wrong sensitive attachment.
Yeah.
We actually can predict that and intervene and keep them from making that mistake versus just realizing most security companies actually only can inform you after the fact.
Sure.
Hey, this happened.
It's reactive.
And we react and now hey, let's lock it down and then let's solve for making sure this doesn't happen again. We actually can go a step before that and actually prevent it from ever happening in the first place.
Wow.
Very interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about kind of your career path. You say that you credit a lot of senior sales leaders for kind of giving you a shot, giving you a chance when you frankly weren't proven, maybe not ready.
Yeah.
So for the aspiring, sales leaders that are listening, how did you initially establish this circle of mentors who kind of helped prepare you and give you that opportunity?
I think it's just exemplifying a desire and passion to want to learn and get better. So I mean, I can literally go, I remember my first month working at LinkedIn, I joined as an account executive there. It was my first time working for a software company in like a traditional sales role. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea like half the terminology people around me were using. And I remember like we got our list of accounts for the year and we're supposed to be scrubbing them. I'm like, I don't know what scrubbing means. Like, how am I supposed to physically clean these accounts? How do I actually do that?
Where does this list exist?
Where do you actually, how do I do this? Like, I just had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
But I had the will and desire to learn and get better. And I just went to people around me that I realized were really talented and smart. And I just honestly kind of forced myself on them and just like, I'm not going away. I'm going to be that annoying person who's tapping you on the shoulder.
Sure.
Like, how do you do this? What about that? And I think at first I was initially for a very short amount of time apprehensive around doing that because I was worried like, oh, they're going to realize like I don't know what I'm doing. And then I realized no one knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
We're all trying to figure this out. We're going to role you're in. You're
Right.
trying to figure out what you're doing. And I realized like people actually really wanted to work with people who were that invested in wanting to learn and get better.
Yeah.
And so even though I didn't have the skill, I think they were willing to give me future opportunities because like I was so passionate about just wanting to figure things out.
Yeah. I think that's a fair, fear too, right? Is like, especially when you're new, you don't really know a ton. It's like, I really want to ask these questions, but I'm also really nervous how I'll be perceived because I'm asking these questions, right? Now that you're a global sales leader, do you have like a mentorship circle still? And are you maybe kind of paying it forward to like mentoring, younger or more junior folks?
Yeah, both for sure. The hard thing is like if I could just mentor people all day, I would, but there's just only so many hours you can dedicate towards it. So it's challenging to find the balance. But yes, I have people who mentor me that I go to very frequently to bounce ideas off them, get their feedback. Sometimes have them kind of check me and put me back in place.
Never hurts.
Yeah, very much so. And that list of mentors I think changes. I think as you evolve, the mentors you work with need to evolve as well.
Yeah.
And that's actually something that I learned when I had a mentor tell me like, I'm no longer mentoring you. I'm no longer the right person.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm tapping out and it's time for you to kind of move on.
Was it that person thought, hey, I've pretty much just gotten you as far as I
Exactly.
can?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. For our relationship and for the things you needed when we started in this relationship, like you're there and it's time for you to get someone else now.
Yeah.
That was helpful and then empowered me for when I'm mentoring people to know like there's going to be a time and an expectation I need to set with. There'll be a time where like I've helped you to the degree that I really can and maybe I can help you get to the next mentor, but like this relationship won't be as fruitful as you want it to be now.
Yeah.
I love that honesty and like being upfront with, whoever you are spending that time with, that you want to make sure that they're successful, that they're investing the time in the right ways and with the right people to get to the next step that they want to get to.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'm curious is like, I think in tech, like we move so quickly, right? And people become managers and directors and VPs faster than anywhere else I've ever seen in any other industry, right? Like you, for example, 10 years from not knowing what scrubbing is to leading a global sales team in 10 years, right? Like that's not a lot of time. Like you've clearly learned a lot. My question is, did you have any self-doubt when it's like you get that manager bump for the first time, when you become a director, a VP, you're reporting to the board for the first time? Did you experience any self-doubt? He's nodding a bit for the folks that can't see, but if so, like how did you kind of manage that?
All the time. Yeah. I think it happens all the time. And anyone who says it doesn't, I think they're just not being either honest with themselves or with you. Sure. It's tough though. I think when you're leading, there needs to be like a certain level of kind of confidence that you can project to the team, especially in sales. Like
yes,
it's stressful enough. I can't put my own anxieties, fears, and doubts on the team around me.
Yeah.
And kind of just pile on, so to speak. But yeah, there's doubt all the time. When things are moving quickly, like you're not always going to have the right answers. And I think what I realized, actually not even that long ago, is I got comfortable knowing that like this is a boat that most people are in.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy. And I think especially in sales, we're all really good at projecting this image. And we tell these amazing stories of, I figured these things all out. And, there was no real pivot or challenge along the way.
The triumphant stories.
Yeah. And and I just think it's unfair because it's not real. It's like there's tons of times where you're scratching your head and you don't know what to do next, or you're not sure why it's not working the way you planned it to work. And I think the people who are the most successful are the ones that get very comfortable in that space of that doubt and know that everyone else feels similarly and has been in this position. And then you can't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. And it, you know, in my past life, I was in sales. And so it's like, it is funny when when you've been in sales long enough, you know those triumphant stories, you hear them and you nod and you're like, I know that's not the full truth. You know what I mean? Like, I know you're hitting your head against the wall. You were frustrated. There was some some tough days in there. So I think it's refreshing to hear, someone who's leading a global sales team say, hey, it's all good. Like, it's normal, it's accepting, and we can talk through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just figuring out how do you kind of not let it impact your decision-making process or kind of hold you back.
Right.
It can't be paralyzing. And for some people it can be.
Yeah.
So you've worked at some incredible companies, LinkedIn, Dropbox, Intercom, now Tessian. What are some of the check boxes that you use to evaluate when it's time to move on to the next company, and then when you're looking at that next company, what is the right company for you?
Yeah.
I've had people ask me that, and I have kind of the few things that I looked at, for example, when I joined Gong, but would love to hear how did you figure out this is the right company and fit for me?
So it changes, I think, as the role you're looking for, what you think you need next. So it definitely evolves, and for me has evolved. What I was looking for when I went to Dropbox versus what I was looking for when I went to Tessian more recently has definitely changed. The thing I tell people a lot when they're earlier on in their careers is, and I've learned this just through life experience, as you have more experience and you get older, fewer things matter.
Yeah.
Truly matter, but the things that matter just matter exponentially more. And so when I was thinking about where I wanted to go next, so Sheena, to answer the first part of your question, I think there becomes a time, and this is different for everyone, but I think about the cross-section of, is there more for me to learn, and is there more for me to add to this team? And I think you have to have a real conversation with yourself around, am I still learning? If you are, stay where you are. I think people are so quick to think of the next shiny thing.
Yeah.
If you're learning, improving, and getting better, and you should stay in that environment you're in. Yeah. Because you're obviously one that's fostering and supporting you and helping you develop. Stay there.
Very true.
But there is a natural point in time where what you can accomplish in your role or in future roles, your learning curve just starts to slow down. And when you can start to feel that. I think everyone can start to feel that. So then it's thinking is there a different role or opportunity for me here at this company that I've started to establish myself at and have these relationships at for me to continue to evolve and learn?
Right.
Or is it time for me to think externally?
Yeah.
So I think it's planning for that. And then when you start to feel that, then it's trying to figure out can I succession plan? Who is the next person to kind of come up behind me that will kind of take these things further? And they will be inspired because they will have a whole new level of growing, kind of filling in this role.
Yeah. And it's something, that last decision, finding the next person to replace you, it shows how invested you are in the work that you've done and the development you could help that team. If you're hey, I don't want to just leave the reins to somebody. I want to find who can pick up where I left off and really take it to the next level.
So maybe we can dig into a few of your different experiences over time. So at Dropbox specifically, you managed the mid-market team. I believe you had 40 AEs that were reporting to you. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Tell us a little bit about your experiences, specifically managing a mid-market team. What were some of the unique challenges with that sector versus, now you've looked across different segments?
Yeah. So when I joined Dropbox, we didn't have a sales team. So we were just getting ready to launch our first business product, literally called Dropbox for Business. And it was getting ready to ship. And so we were kind of preparing for that. But what the company realized was we're trying to establish ourselves within the enterprise space. And then we have all of these inbound leads of people who are asking us is there a business version of this? That would be cool if there was. And those were very small companies, but then there was this huge market opportunity in the middle that no one was paying attention to at Dropbox. And so they're hey, let's hire someone to see if they can figure out can we do business in this kind of mid-market space? So when I joined, there was literally a team of 0. And we had some folks who were insanely bright who had joined in generalist roles and kind of just raised their hand to join the sales team without any kind of previous sales experience.
Interesting.
We had someone who joined from Goldman Sachs, who was an analyst.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy, went to Dartmouth, but had never done sales before, never worked in a tech company. And he raised his hand and said, I'll help figure out this sales thing. So the team was 0 when we started. And then we had a small team in like that first year, and really just even that first quarter, figure out like, is there an opportunity here? And if there is, can we actually capture it? Or what would the product we would need be to actually kind of do business here? And like we figured it out pretty quickly and like just started hiring like crazy. I think there was one period there in that first full year, we hired like 55 people in the first 5 quarters.
Wow.
So we kind of just threw the gas on the fire and went. And then based off of our success there, and as we kind of grew, then I kind of took over ownership for the enterprise team as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I saw it from your LinkedIn, it was the largest P&L team. So I imagine deals are getting bigger, deals are getting more complex. You start to know what you're doing now, right? So you can iterate the playbook. What was your kind of like deal execution, like strategy or philosophy as you were kind of like coaching your team on how to approach those deals?
Well, we would maniacally measure our funnel and constantly try to figure out without any historical data.
That's the fun part.
No actuals. Like, okay, let's look at some other companies and how they benchmark.
Yeah.
And like, what should our conversion rates be? And then you kind of guess and try to back into what those look like. And then, you just kind of dedicate yourself to having a couple quarters and get some data and see like, are conversion rates better, worse? Let's understand why. What we realized kind of early on was we were selling to the wrong audience.
Interesting. Who were you guys trying to go for, and who did you end up figuring out was better?
We thought we could go to power users of Dropbox. And so we thought, based off of the data we had, we knew people that were getting value personally from Dropbox. And it's interesting, so many of those people would actually sign up using their work email domain.
Yeah.
And so we're like, like interesting, like you're sharing and working on like PowerPoints and Excel. Like this isn't just family photos you're storing here. Like you're using this to do work. And what we actually thought was like, you're going to be our evangelist. Like maybe for your team, we can kind of get in and we can land an initial deal. And that did not work well. And we quickly kind of realized like, oh, we're selling to the wrong audience. And then we kind of picked up and did some real soul searching of like, how do we kind of pivot this? And we realized, no, we actually have to go and sell to IT initially and not try to circumvent them, so to speak.
Sure. I've been there myself.
Yeah, it didn't help. Like it and rightfully so, like it was frustrating to them that they weren't early on involved in this conversation, part of the evaluation. And also we realized like if we wanted to like build the right types of longer term relationships, they had to be part of this early on. And we had to start helping them understand with, yes, we get it. You've got G Drive and you've got these other things, but here's why you need, or your employees need this in addition to the other tools you have. And that was a real inflection point. Once we realized we needed to sell to IT, it changed everything and we started to accelerate.
Interesting. Was it then a process of retraining the folks that you had on the team to sell to a new audience? Or was it like bringing in new folks to sell to the new audience, combination of both? How did you make that shift happen in reality?
Yeah, it was definitely both. We realized like, okay, we're selling to a more technical buyer. And so we had to train ourselves to understand like what is important to this persona. What's top of mind? What do they care about? And how can we kind of start to build a relationship and trust with them and speak their language, so to speak. Part of that was hiring some people so we could do it quickly who'd had experience selling to more technical buyers. But also it was just a complete retraining of the team. Yeah. And then we also realized in doing that our pitch had to change as well. And that we felt our initial pitch was coming off as a little too like fear-based.
How so, if you can share?
So, we would tell people, essentially we'd be like, gosh, you have all these people using Dropbox and they're using it for work purposes, but they're using the wrong version of it. You don't really have the insight control over like who's sharing what and with who and in what way, and they're not meeting kind of your security protocols. And that's like not a great way to build a relationship. It feels
nor with that audience, I don't think.
No, they were kind of like, are you trying to like back us in a corner and be like, you have this problem? And people would call it like the Dropbox problem. That you and your company, you created this problem for us. Like it just felt like a little too heavy handed.
Sure.
And so we realized we need to actually start telling more of a story of like collaboration, how they actually could be empowering people to do work the way they wanted to if they had the right version of Dropbox.
That's such a fundamental difference, though, right? And I've definitely had that. I've sold to salespeople in most of my career, so it's like you're selling to salespeople, you're speaking the same language, they see the value, and then you're like, "Cool, IT needs to take a look," and you try to sidestep it. It's like, no, they're not going to get it. It's not for them, and I won't say which companies, but definitely a hard learning curve. And then once you accept it and start to learn how you can speak their language, you actually kind of empower your sales team to have more effective conversations, but more effective conversations with different types of people. And those conversations are very different.
Yeah. Yeah. And we started focusing less on data actually, and more on telling stories of success from other companies similar to them.
Yeah.
And I think like that was something that we really learned, and was like, we really have to focus our energies on like learning how to storytell
Yeah.
effectively.
Well, it's interesting. You started with data to figure out something was wrong, right? Figured out why. And then it's like, okay, the solve isn't more data to these people. It's just a great narrative they can get behind.
Data can get your attention and interest, but at the end of the day, like decision making is emotional, and like telling the right stories, I think we learned was really important.
That's amazing. We've had a couple episodes on that exact theme as well. Like with Tim, for example, Tim Reister of Corporate Visions and some others like that. Being able to tell the story and empowering your team too is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like Intercom built this like amazing brand loyalty, and like released insane content and got insane amount of leads, and like did a great job of like helping people convert from, trial to customer. But as we started to kind of grow and wanted to keep accelerating revenue, like we started to tap out, and it like revenue growth wasn't keeping pace with where we wanted to. And you start realizing like as we move up market, like this kind of trial first approach wasn't going to work.
Interesting.
But actually like threading the needle on like how do we help make that transition elegantly, where we actually going more outbound and actually targeting the people we know we should be doing business with.
Yeah.
It's just such a fundamentally different way to market and acquire customers, and then make them happy and successful post sale.
Yeah.
Like that was something that is still a work in progress, but like was such an interesting learning experience for us there, and getting people, I think, comfortable with the upfront investment you need to make around hiring a sales team and a post-sale success team, and there's like this huge lift from the investment you need to make up front to see the returns.
Yep.
And it's like a different acquisition model. And so I think getting your company and finance team in particular comfortable with those things was like a huge lesson for us.
Yeah.
But there, because of the velocity of deals, like, talk about like reliance on data. I mean, we spent most of our time A/B testing. And actually, Karen Peacock, the company's chief operating officer, like I spent more time actually dissecting data and understanding how to controls, and like when you would run an A/B test, when would you have a winner, what is statistically significant, like trying to make things mutually exclusive so we could test properly.
Right.
That was something I really developed as a leader there and just didn't have a lot of exposure to previously. Yeah. And it made me better from actually like investigating things and taking a more data-driven versus anecdotal or sales intuition approach.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to this shift from kind of like the self-service model to a sales model. I was at Eventbrite, where I don't know if I can say percentages, not that I probably remember them accurately anyway, but a large portion was self-service. You just go to eventbrite.com, you probably all done it or bought a ticket, and then they're like, we're going to build out this large accounts team, and that's where I came in. And it's a very different atmosphere from when day one is we need this B2B team to work and we're starting getting revenue, to you're kind of a nice to have, right? Or like you're the future, but like how do we, justify millions of it in salary, knowing it's going to take months to get there. So I can't overstate enough like what that is like. That dynamic is very different.
Yeah, and then even the relationship of like, how do you expand your relationship with those customers who purchase self-serve? So like we would have groups at like very large blue chip companies that had like a specific team that used Intercom in a very unique, specific way. And, we wanted to grow that relationship, but how do you actually artfully go about working with them to grow it? Whereas, trying to connect the dots from, one specific like data team that's using this to test things to going enterprise wide. How do you do that? How do you make that that transition? Like that was a really unique challenge we had there as well.
Well, yeah, it's not even just changing how they use your software. It's how they engage with your company, right? They used to do it all on their own. And now you're like, hey, don't just buy more. Work with me to do it, right? It's a shift for sure.
Into focus. The last big thing we had to figure out that I think lots of companies struggle with is like, where do you focus your attention and energy? And there's, for a company like Intercom, there's, it's a big, powerful product. There's so many different use cases and ways to use it.
Sure.
And so what are the ones that you focus on further investing in from a product development perspective?
Yep.
And why?
Yep.
And you can't do everything. So where are you really going to focus? Like we would have so many conversations around like, where do we focus? There's so many different things we could do, down market, up market, in different industries and for different use cases. Which ones are we going to focus on investing in and when and why?
Right.
Yeah.
I think those, we were talking about like the shifts that happen within a company, like going from self-service to more outbound. And when I was at MongoDB, for example, we were similarly very individual focused. We were an open source product. So we had a really strong community of developers, and they would pick up our product, use it for free, build all these apps. It was great. But then we had this challenge of, hey, how are we going to now start getting buy-in from IT, from enterprises, and make this an enterprise-grade product? And so it was a shift for the whole company, right? It was like the sales motion, the marketing, the partnerships that I was working on. And I think those are really interesting learning experiences to be at companies during those times, because you see that before and after. There are a lot of struggles in between, but if you have like the right team in place and you have that curiosity to learn, it really comes together.
Yeah.
So, going through those those changes with companies, I think are really great experiences for folks.
Actually, I would, to add on to that, like from a career development perspective, I think sometimes people in sales get a little too focused on like, what's my responsibility and role? And when they feel like they're tapping out or they want more, they leave to search for another company where their role and responsibility or title and comp package will change. Yeah. And they do that at the cost sometimes of just being part of an amazing company and being part of that learning as a company of like, how do we develop and grow? And I think for me, what I've learned from the companies who are interested in trying to like recruit me or want to spend time with me, it's not necessarily always what you were directly responsible for. It's what were you surrounded by? Yeah. What was the environment like that you were a part of? And what were the key learnings for the company? That exposure, I think, is actually insanely valuable. And I try to coach people on that when I'm mentoring them all the time. I'm like, stop for thinking about your title. Don't go to like a tier 2 or tier 3 company. Slow down. Like think about all the things you're learning about how a company builds as being part of this.
Right. You're part of that story.
Absolutely.
You're part of creating that company. So
and that's very marketable.
Yeah.
So you've been a part of a handful of very successful hypergrowth companies, including right now. I know that hiring is exceptionally important, finding the right talent. What are some of the types of skills, traits, mindsets that you look for when you're hiring sales reps? And you can extend to sales leaders too, if you like.
Yeah. I would say it's the same for both. I don't look too much at past experience at all. I think more about, and I test for how inquisitive they are and how fast I think they can be coached and learn and grow. And I think like how comfortable being uncomfortable are they? Mindset to me, I think is so much more important than where you worked, who you sold to, what were your average deal sizes. Like you'll learn those things. I think I see amazing salespeople join high growth stage companies and fail because it's too much for them. They're too used to having a lot of resource and process and playbook and like something to follow and navigate, and they'll do it very well and be very disciplined about it. Right. But they're insanely uncomfortable being in a company where it's like, we don't know.
We don't have a map. We need to write the map.
Yeah, you need to help us write it.
Yeah.
So I actually think like mindset is more important to me than anything, and like a self-awareness for what we're doing now and what we could be doing in the future. And I like we test for that. That's most of what we test for when we're interviewing.
How do you do that?
Ooh, I have lots of questions I want to reveal because hopefully there's people listening to this that we might want to interview in the future. But I would say most of it is understanding, talking through problems people face, and then how did they overcome them. And most of it is like looking for those stories around obstacles that they faced personally and professionally, how it impacted them, how they quantified it, and then how did they go about actually trying to solve that problem for themselves.
Yeah.
Like understanding their decision-making process, how self-aware they are, how resourceful they can be, how creative they are in thinking through those things. And how much do we believe like this is someone who's going to persevere?
Yeah.
And when things get really hard, they're not going to go look for something else.
Yeah. I asked something similar. I also won't share it just because. No, but I asked, like, tell me what's one of your biggest professional failures and why, and how did you bounce back? I look at what people pick as the biggest failure. I want to hear something real, not, I missed one deadline one time or missed quota by 5%.
And you know when it's like, come on. Right?
Yeah. The thing I look for too is how they tell that story. Right? Like, are they kind of just like, are they passionate about it and they kind of get fired up thinking about that failure and how they overcame it? Or does it feel kind of like this, kind of boring linear story of, this happened and that, and now I'm here and everything's good. Right. So I can definitely relate to that in terms of looking for, that grit and the passion for it.
Literally, one of our cultural values is grit and perseverance.
It's a good one. All right, Sheena, you want to take us home with the last main question?
Final wrap up. So we're moving into 2020, start of the year. What is the most important skill that you think sales leaders should focus on this year?
Ooh, that sales leaders should focus on. Time management. Everywhere I go, and I'm guilty of this as much as the next person, there's only so many hours in the day. Are you focusing on the most needle moving things for your team? And consistently, people just react. They come into work and they're catching up on email and they've got people they need to get back to on Slack or Microsoft Teams if you use that. And they just kind of react to the day. And then they pull up at the end of the day or end of the week. And it's like, did you actually accomplish what you needed to? Did you actually move things forward?
Yeah.
And I don't think people are comfortable saying no or kind of redelegating things on their teams. Time management it's just with how many tools we have, and they're all meant to give us time back, and somehow they don't.
Yeah.
And like we need to create space to just think.
Yeah.
I oftentimes will encourage leaders on my team to be like, you should work from home half a day a week or 1 day a week. Like you need time to just think and get away from your day to day.
Yeah.
Do you block out time on your calendar,
Absolutely.
like thinking time?
Yes. And it gets moved around the calendar, but you need time just to think and just process. And we all try to go way too fast and do way too many things, and fewer things done better, actually, I think is like a pretty good mantra.
Yep.
But yeah, time management.
That's great. And please describe sales in one word. We get a variety of different answers. So
One word.
Yeah, if you can. It can be hyphenated.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, to me, active listening, but you could just shorten it down to just listening.
Nice. We finally have a duplicate in a good way.
Really?
Yeah. So we were just talking on our last podcast. We've asked this about 15 times, and we had never had a duplication of the answer. But you are in fantastic company because it's from Dan Shapiro, the VP of Global Solutions at LinkedIn, which is where you started your career. So maybe all the folks that are, starting at LinkedIn, working at LinkedIn are just great listeners.
I was very fortunate early on in my LinkedIn kind of career to get to spend some meaningful time with Dan. So
there it is. There's the connection.
It all comes together.
Looks like I might have benefited from it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, this was honestly a fantastic interview. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your journey.
Yeah, happy to help.
Terrific to
Thanks
meet
for
you.
having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks.